Police Minister Bheki Cele says 7 people have been arrested in connection with the murder of 8 people in Richmond. He says high-caliber guns and drugs were recovered during the arrests, which took place at multiple locations. The deadly shooting occurred last month.
We are pleased with progress thus far made, that the various investigating teams have heeded this call to act with agility and precision by finding those who either planned these hits or pulled on the trigger. We simply cannot co-govern with criminals. We have been saying this time and again. Members of the media, to this end, much progress has been made in the Richmond multiple shooting that claimed 8 lives, including that of a 17-year-old teenager. The shooting took place on the 14th of January at the homestead of Estlageni. A multidisciplinary operation was conducted in the Richmond area and resulted in the arrest of 7 suspects, aged between 21 and 43 years old, who were arrested in different locations and found to be in possession of several high-caliber firearms and ammunition, including possession of drugs.
Cele further raised concern about the spike in shootings in that province.
This province has recorded 229 incidents of multiple murder from 1st of April last year to 23rd June 2021. Multiple murder is one incident but more than one victim that has died. 531 people were killed in these incidents, majority of which took place in the eThekwini municipality, followed by Umgungundlovu municipality. While the motives for some of these attacks are still subject for police investigations, drugs wars, retaliation and revenge remain the leading causes for cases where motives have been established.
Well, for more on the story, we're joined by Institute for Security Studies policing researcher Dr. Johan Burger. Dr. Burger, these figures are incredibly alarming. 531 fatalities in a space of 10 months. Where else do we see that rate of killings?
Yeah, well, if you are referring to the killings in KZN, I think the province is relatively unique in this instance of large-scale killings, but it does compare well with 2 other provinces, the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape. I think between those 3 provinces, they drive the highest murder rate in this country, and they actually look like they are competing for the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place. So, but what is different in KZN is that you often see mass murders where a number of people are killed in single incidents, which makes it relatively different from what we see in the Western Cape and in the Eastern Cape.
What is it about these 3 provinces, and perhaps just looking at perhaps the patterns that can be carried across all 3 that enable this to be happening, or that drive rather this violence?
Yeah, it's very difficult to say because they are quite different in terms of the factors, conditions that drive their high murder rates. In KZN, it seems to be largely a question of faction fighting, where large groups are killed. In the Western Cape, you also find a situation of, I think, largely socioeconomic, but also gang-related. Gang violence is one of the big drivers of killings in the Western Cape, but you do see in certain areas, such as in Khayelitsha, we saw that, and certain of the other less developed areas in the Western Cape, where it looks like the police appear to be less effective in maintaining control in those situations. And I think to a large extent, this is what we see in the Eastern Cape as well. The Eastern Cape, I think, to some extent corresponds with KZN in terms of its rural areas that are, outlying areas. They are far from police stations, so you won't very often see police patrols in all of those outlying areas. So each of them are different in terms of the driving factors of the killings, but in each of them, even though they are different, there are particular factors there that appear to be driving violent crime, and that includes murder in those three provinces.
Dr. Burger, I want us to focus then on KZN. And when we compare perhaps some of these figures that the police minister was reading out today with the historic data about the murder rate in KwaZulu-Natal, are we seeing any significant fluctuations there, whether increasing or decreasing?
Yeah, it's difficult. I don't have those figures with me, but I know from looking at these figures in the past that it does fluctuate. It seems that you get a situation where there's revenge, there's attacks and revenge attacks, and so it goes on until the police succeeds in arresting a large enough number of those involved in those killings to stop it for a while. Then you would find for a period some level of normality, and until the outbreak again of some historic conflict situation, and then you have another spate of attacks, revenge attacks, counterattacks, and so on. And that is what sets KZN really apart from any one of the other two provinces. Well, those two other provinces, but the rest of the country.
Let's talk about the police's strategy here. Is there anything that you think they could be doing differently in terms of managing this violence and I suppose at some level trying to prevent it from even taking place?
Yeah, I think the police are faced with a number of challenges. First of all, I don't think they have enough ground coverage. They don't have enough police officers to cover the whole of the geographical area of KZN, especially in the deep rural areas. Secondly, the ability to access some of those areas because of the terrain, access routes and so on, makes it extremely difficult. So they have to rely in urgent cases on air transport, helicopters and so on, to take police officers to those areas that do experience this kind of violence at any particular time. And then thirdly, I think from a preventative point of view, we appear to be quite weak as far as intelligence is concerned. We know that these attacks, whether it's first-time attacks, revenge attacks, counterattacks, that this involves relatively large groups of people. We know that they plan this for a time, enough time for the police to take immediate intervention action. But it looks like the police are completely unable to generate the kind of intelligence that is necessary for them to take preventative steps in those areas. So I think the absence of timeous intelligence in the Western, in KZN is one of the biggest challenges.
Dr. Burger, you talk about the challenges that the police are facing, and just yesterday we had a conversation that looked at the impact of the impending budget cuts and the fact that we're likely to lose even more police officers as a result of that. How does this trickle down ultimately to policing a province like KZN. I imagine that those who are behind this violence and who are the criminals are also watching the situation, and it's almost enabling the environment for violence to continue a lot more unabated.
Yes, Kathy, you're absolutely right. I think, the police are faced with a number of challenges. There's the leadership crisis. The National Commissioner who's expecting a letter from the President at any time to suspend him. And of course, one of his deputies may face a similar situation of suspension. They are, it's been reported in the media often, the infighting, the battles, internal battles between some of our generals. So at a leadership level, there are problems. Going down the line to grassroots level, to police stations, I think the police are again challenged by the high level of corruption, criminality that we see at police station level. And then the question of resource. Many of our police stations are and have been under-resourced for decades. And it is in particular the rural police stations that suffer most in terms of resources, which means something like sector policing is almost impossible to implement at those police stations given their lack of resources, including personnel. So one can imagine a 26 billion budget cut over a period of 3 years. It's already had an impact, 11 billion in the current financial year, with the rest over the next 2 years. There's already been almost 4,000 fewer police officers this year than there's been in the previous year, which means that those police stations experiencing a sparsity in terms of their personnel levels will be affected even more as a result of this. You can imagine the strain that places on police management at, in the provinces and at station level, and the police officers themselves, that will have to do more with fewer police officers, because it affects not only visible policing, but also the detective service. And we know that the detectives carry an impossible caseload in terms of the number of cases they have to investigate. So, it's not a healthy situation for the police. So some of these challenges are challenges of their own making, as I mentioned, in terms of the leadership and other problems, and then the challenges that they now face as a result of budget cuts, and of course resources that will be affected by this. So this will benefit only one group of people, and that group is the criminals of this country. They will certainly, because as you said, they also hear and see and read in the media what is happening. And if there is something to be exploited, it is this budget cut, which will seriously impact on the effectiveness of the police.
Dr. Johan Burger, let's leave it there for tonight. He's with the Institute for Security Studies.